there was another competition, and this time another guy got the job, which was the equivalent to a BG. It's an SES, Senior Executive Service, the highest rank you could get in the Air Force or Civil Service. But he turned out he didn't want it after he won it. So the guy who ran the evaluation said to the guy who had made the decisions, why don't we just take the next guy on the list, which was me. And I said,
yeah,
all for that.
I'll take it.
So I got promoted, and I got out of the what we call the black hole, where we're doing all this interesting stuff. And I went back to the home office, kind of like a staff job, which I hated. I hated staff jobs. I always wanted to be program guy. And I was there for about a year. And one day my boss called me up and said, didn't you say you wanted to be the chief engineer on the ATF? And I said, well, yeah. He said, well, you are. I said, really? I said, yeah. Yeah, I and General McMullen decided that you should be the guy. I said, super, when do I start? And he says, we'll get back to you. I said, okay. So about 2 weeks later, I was the chief engineer of the Advanced Tactical Fighter.
Wow.
And at the time, the program was completely different from what it turned out to be.
Mm-hmm.
There were no airplanes. It was all a avionics laboratory to figure out how you make these common modules and all kinds of fancy avionics stuff. It was a whole bunch of trade studies and wind tunnel testing to see what the actual development airplane was going to be, and a full-scale model of the airplane where they would take it out to the radar range and see what the radar cross-section was going to be. And that was kind of the program. And so we had sent out what was called a request for information. And the reason it happened was the Air Force didn't know whether A, it should be an invisible A7, which they sort of had already, called the F-117, or B, an invisible F-15, or C, an invisible SR-71 or A-12.
Wow.
So they were doing all these studies. We had an in-house design team and would do different studies of different airplanes as to what their capabilities were and what have you. And we had wargaming models where you could fly one-on-one or many-on-many in a model to see what the best exchange ratio would be against the opposition, whatever they might be. And so they finally decided that what they really wanted was an invisible F-15 class airplane. Didn't want the F-117 again, didn't want the super streaker. They wanted a dogfighter that was as invisible as it could be.
Yep.
And that's when I got in the boat. When they finally decided what they wanted, they said they got to have somebody in charge who knows what the hell they're doing.
Nice.
And for some stupid reason, they picked me. But so I got down there, and Northrop was on one of their tours through Wright-Patterson up to Washington to show people what they had. And so they stopped at Wright-Patterson, and I went in a briefing. When they talked about 3 hours for what the F-23, which came to be the F-23, was going to be and what it looked like, et cetera, et cetera. And about a week after that, there was an in-flight incident with a Nighthawk, an F-117. And because I was accessed and I had the background, they said, go find out what's going on. So that involved going out to the skunk works at Lockheed. And we went through what we did, and I can't really talk about a whole lot.
Mm.
And the head of the skunk works, Ben Rich, who you might have heard of, quite famous as a airplane designer, says, I want to show you guys our airplane, which turned out to be the YF-22. So he gets his guys in, and we spent about 3 hours seeing what their airplane would look like. And then I went back to Wright-Patterson. About 2 weeks later, we dropped the RFP, the request for proposal for the program of what turned out to be the YF-22-23 thing. And once you do that, you can't talk to anybody ever again until the proposals are done and the contract signed. Mm-hmm. So I got to see the 2 guys that eventually won, which had nothing to do with it. It was just luck of the draw but nobody else I could see. So,
Yeah.
so this RFP goes out, and we had a big, here's how we're going to evaluate, here's the criteria, here's what we're going to do, blah, 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 all the bureaucratic stuff you go through. And then the word comes down and says, and oh, by the way, you're going to have some airplanes in this thing too. And we said, holy crud, how are we going to do this? Because, we had $1.98 to do this other stuff, and airplanes are like $8,000, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
And we didn't have that. So we immediately run up to the Pentagon and say, look, guys, we'll be happy to do this, but, contractors probably like to be paid. And they said, how much? And we told them, and they said, we ain't got that. I said, well, what do you have?
How much you got? We'll make it work.
So we worked with a guy named Mike Lowe, brilliant guy, absolutely brilliant guy, wound up as a commander attack. And he starts sweeping the cupboard, getting money from here and money from there. And he calls us up, and the deputy director of the program sitting there with a phone and a kind of a spreadsheet. And he says, Mike comes over and he says, I got you another, whatever, $100 million. Not enough. I said, well, okay, let me go sweep some. It takes about a day. And him going through all the closets and cubby holes and every place else to get as much money together as we can. And he says, that's all there is, guys. See what happens. So they said, all right, we got to change the program. So they said, you got to add the airplane. So it's up to me because I did all the technical part of the contract. And so I wrote the requirement for the prototypes. And I think this is exactly the words that I use. It says the contractor will design, build, and construct 2 prototype aircraft, each powered by a different engine that will take off under their own power, period. And that was the requirement for the prototypes. And I got a lot of flack from people who said, well, they got to have so much range, they got to have so much sustained G, they got to have this, they got to have. I said, that ain't going to happen, guys. So why not? I said, well, first thing's going to happen is they ain't going to meet it. And the second thing's going to happen, Congress is going to get involved. We ain't going to get any airplanes.
Yeah. Wow.
So we ain't going to have any requirements. But we got to have requirements. How can we judge them? I said, listen, you have the 7 best airplane companies in the world competing for this job. 2 of them are going to win. And if you don't think they're going to compete to the best of their ability, you're crazy.
Yeah.
So we aren't going to have any requirements. And I fought that battle for years.
Wow.
But I said, I'm not doing it. And they backed me up, so I never did. So we sent the thing out to the contractors, and we sent a little note along, but by General McMullen. He ran the aircraft development part at Wright-Patterson, and said, teaming is strongly encouraged, because we didn't want somebody to go bankrupt because we didn't have enough money. So the next thing we get word back that says Lockheed, Boeing, and General Dynamics are going to team, and whichever design is picked as the winner, we will all work to make that design happen. Okay. So your call, up to you. But we aren't signing any contracts with any team. We are signing a contract with a prime contractor because we don't want to be referees.
Right.
We just want to evaluate you and how you do your job. Well, Northrop and McAir got wind of that, and they said, me too. So they joined up. Now, this is going to be interesting because, as I recalled, on the YF-17 to YF-18, McDonnell took Northrop and put them in the backseat of the airplane.
Yeah.
And now Northrop put McDonnell Douglas in the backseat of the airplane.
Wow.
So the guy went from the pilot in command to the gib, and then the gib went back to being the pilot in command, and the other guy was the gib. So they worked it out. And then there were 2 other guys, Rockwell and Grumman, and they didn't have a dance partner because everybody else joined up with these other 2 teams. So we waited for the proposals. And in the meantime, somebody says, well, how are you going to evaluate these airplanes? I said, well, I'm not going to. well, but you can't. We're building an airplane. We gotta have something to, so I'm not gonna do it. Because it's not in the contract. So they said, what are you gonna do about that? I said, well, look, the whole idea of this program was risk reduction. So that when you start the real development, you don't have a lot of surprises. You will have some, but you don't want a lot. You don't want major, oh, crud. And so we're going to look at what they're going to do with these airplanes and what they're going to prove to themselves and to us that they can do in the real program. And so we'll use the same criteria to evaluate the program, not the airplane. And we will continue to do the other stuff that we had planned to do already. And you will then evaluate those programs and say who has the best program out of all the submissions.
Yeah.
And so we did it that way. And all 7 contractors sent in their proposals in terms of what they were going to do and what their airplane would look like. I frankly didn't look at their airplanes except to laugh at a couple of them because they were out there. A contractor who will not be named, and the missile launch sites at the shoulders of the pilot. So there would be a trapeze that would come out and an AMRAAM would go flying past your windscreen.
Right over your shoulder?
And I said, I don't believe that'll be a satisfactory solution.
So it's like shoulder launches?
Yeah,
Wow.
like you would have a bazooka on your shoulder in the cockpit.
Wow.
The trapeze could mount and phew, off it would go. Now, if your windscreen would stand that, that'd probably be good. But maybe if you shot 2 of them, maybe it wouldn't. I don't know. Much less not being able to see anything. So, there were some different kinds of design concepts. Let's put them that way. So we went through the evaluation, and it was clear that Northrop and Lockheed knew what they were doing. They had the background in stealth, RCS, IR suppression, all the things that you need to make an invisible airplane. I call it invisible for. The other guys sort of knew what they were doing, but it was clear that they didn't have the technology in the background to really exploit what you could do with something that you would put in terms of RCS. So it was a pretty easy solution that we got down to the 2 airplanes. And then there was a naming contest of who's going to get what number. I said, the program director is going to flip a coin, and whoever calls it, the visiting team, and they get first pick of numbers. It'll be YF-22 and YF-23. And I think Lockheed won the coin toss, and they picked YF-22, and Northrop was happy with YF-23. That's how they got their names.
Oh, wow.
And then we also said, now look, you each got to have a GE engine and a Pratt engine in your 2 airplanes. And it's up to you to choose how you're going to do it. And we ain't going to tell you, it's up to you. You just tell us which one you want first. And because we don't want to issue you an engine, it's up to you to pick whichever one you want. And fortunately, Northrop says, we want to put the Pratt engine in our first airplane, and Lockheed said we want to put the GE engine in our first airplane. That's the way it worked out. So we went on our merry way, and Northrop started cutting metal. I mean, as soon as the ink was dry in the contract. And Lockheed kind of fumbled around for a while to figure out exactly what they wanted to do. And so we had what was called a kickoff meeting. After the contract signed, everybody goes out to the contractor and says, do we really understand what you signed up for? Do you really understand what we want? Because now we can actually talk to you and communicate what's going on. So we go roaring out to the West Coast. And we had 3 guys basically that kind of ran the program. The program director. Oh, I got to tell you this story. You love this one. After the source selection, there was a colonel in charge of the program before the source selection, and he was an F-4 pilot, brilliant guy, and quite a salesman, to say the least. And he was the guy who actually got all the program going, a guy named Al Piccirillo, great guy. And he was more of a theoretical type and got the program started and lived through the source selection where we picked Northrop and Lockheed. And then they needed an executor to actually run the program when it became a real program. So they decided to switch out directors. So I got wind that this guy named Jim Fain was going to come down and talk to me because he was going to be the new program director. I said, okay, good. I can deal with that. I've dealt with a lot of program directors. So I was sitting in my office one Saturday figuring out how to structure something. And I gotten the word that this Fang guy was going to come down and he's going to try and bully me. And I said, really? Okay, I'll see what happens. And it wasn't because he was military and I was civilian. It was just that I'm just not that kind of guy to get bullied. You know, it makes sense to me. I'll do what you're telling. If you don't, I'll tell you to do a pound sand. So I'm sitting in the office and here comes this guy roaring into my office. He says, who the hell are you? I said, I'm Rick Abel. He said, what the hell do you do here? I said, well, I kind of sort out all this technical stuff, tell you what the options are, what's going to work, what's not going to work, and then you tell us what to do. And he says, really? I said, yeah. I said, no, you don't. I said, really? I said, you help run this program. I said, I can do that too. I said, good, we'll get along. Off he goes. Well, that was interesting. So Fain's going to be in charge, and then he disappears. He doesn't come back for about a month. I'm wondering what's going on. Well, it turns out, in order to be a program director of a big program, you got to go to program school. And he hadn't been to school yet. But he was a hell of a program. He was picked by the chief of staff of the Air Force to be the guy. But he didn't have his ticket checked. So he had to get a waiver, which takes time and it has to go through some congressional hoorah or whatever. So again, it's a Saturday and I'm in the office and I'm doing some more stuff and here comes this Fain guy again. He comes roaring back in. And he said, I look, I said, oh, you gonna stay this time? He said, I said, well, you know, hey. But we got along great. He did not suffer fools gladly. He just did not do that. We start the program and we go out to Northrop and Northrop's out there. Our airplane will do this and it's going to do that. And it's got this display and you can see everybody in the universe who might shoot at you. And, you know, and we can do blah, 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 blah. They're going on and on and on and on. Like I said, there were three guys who were kind of running the show. The engineer, the finance and contracts guy, who was Colonel Tom Bucher, great guy, smart guy, absolutely brilliant guy. And Jim Fain, the program director, was called the Fog. Okay. So I'm sitting there and I'm kind of listening to what's going on because I know it's all paper. You know, paper airplanes always beat real airplanes. They never do exactly what they're supposed to do. So I'm taking and Bucher, who's the program manager type, keeps wondering how they're going to do this. What's the plan? Where's the schedule? What's the this? Where's the money? Blah, blah, blah. He's getting wrong, you know, but sweat's running down his face. What's going on? So I said, don't worry about it. So then we would roll up to Lockheed, and Lockheed comes out with all these charts about we're going to do this first, and we're going to do that, and that feeds into this, and this goes over here, and the money goes this way, and blah blah blah. And they got all these management plans, and Tom's going there, yeah. And so I pull out one of the little napkins they give you to drink your coffee on, and I write a little note on it, and I pass it down to him. And he opens up the note, and he goes, "Oh no." And what I'd written on a note, I said, this is all very interesting, but where's the airplane? They never showed the airplane.
Yeah.
But they had all the plans about how they're going to make the airplane. So I said, so I got Fain and Tom together that night. And I said, listen, from what I have observed, Northrop is an engineering company who've hired some managers. And Lockheed is a management company who've hired some engineers. And if you look at the way they're running the program, you'll see that. Now, both of them are very capable of delivering what the product's going to be. They're just going to go about it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
The engineers are going to kind of run what Northrop's doing, and the program managers are kind of going to do what Lockheed's doing. And if you keep that separate, you can see what's going on and be able to figure out how to deal with them.
Yeah.
And that was the story of the whole show. There was one program manager for Lockheed for the whole program. There was one chief engineer from Northrop for the whole program. There are a whole bunch of program managers from Northrop and a whole bunch of chief engineers for Lockheed. That's just the way they are.
Mm-hmm.
They probably have changed by now. Don't know. But that's the way you worked it. So the program starts and off we go. Now we got to sign some guys down at TAC DR. And if you may be familiar with TAC DR, DR sets the requirements for airplanes for Tactical Air Command. And they put out the operational requirements document. It says, we want an airplane that's going to do A, B, C, D, E. And we turn that into a specification for an airplane that's going to do A, B, C, D, E.
Mm.
And they had set out this operational requirements document that you would have basically the Klingon Death Star. It was going to do everything to everybody. And the reason for that is they listen to the companies, and the companies will tell you, yeah, man, it's going to make gas when it goes on a mission. It'll carry 17 AMRAAM, and you'll be able to see the universe from a cockpit. And we'll have some of that.
Yeah.
They write it in an order. And so he said, oh, yeah, man, there's the art of the possible, and there's the art of what you want to try to do. And we're going to try to do some stuff, and some of the stuff, you just got to knock this crap off. And so DR, we've got to sign some really good fighter pilots to work with us. And they would give us the input of what a fighter pilot really needs in an air-to-air, air-to-ground, any kind of mission. And they would keep feeding us what they wanted based on what they needed. And sometimes we say, well, that's very interesting, but we ain't going to get that because it ain't going to work. It ain't going to work now, but it might work 10 years from now. Okay. So this feedback we had with the TAC DR guys went very well. And the basic objective of the ATF programs is a 50,000 pound airplane, $35 million flyaway. And that's what they wanted. Oof. And they set that as a hard objective. It was not a requirement, but it was a hard objective. So while the contractors are building their prototypes, because it took about 3 years to do that, they were also doing these studies and things and building models and all the other good stuff that engineers love to dibble in to figure out what's the art of the possible. And so we would talk to DR. He says, well, hey, we can't do this. Like, you want X number of missiles in the airplane, we can only do Y. And you want this thrust reverser because you want to land on a battle damaged runway, but that's going to weigh, 18,000 tons and burn the back of the airplane off. So it's probably not a good idea, but we're going to try that and see what happens. So we had these interchanges with TAC, and we had this big meeting probably about a year into the program. I guess it was a year. Life gets foggy when you get old. And we went roaring down to TAC. My boss had a series of charts that says, we work with your staff. We came with the trade-offs. We're going to not do this. We're going to not do that. We're going to not do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And the net result is what we think we're going to get you is a 50,000 pound airplane, $35 million. It's a killer. And Bob Russ was the commander of TAC at the time, 4-star. And he looks at all that and he says, that's bullshit. And everybody goes, what have we done? He says, you know what the hell you're talking about. So he said, okay, sir. He says, all right, thanks. And we all get back in the airplane, back to Wright Pitiful.
Right.
So that's what the Edwards guys called Wright Patterson. The test guys out of test pilots. It's right pitiful back there in Dayton. So Fang gets on the horn to his boss and says, listen, I'm gone. He says, what do you mean? This is Mike Lowe again. He was 2-star then? Yeah, 2-star.
What year is this? Like what year, what time frame?
This was 85.
Holy
86.
crap.
It's ancient history. So he goes, I'm fired, better get somebody else. I screwed it up. And General Lowe says, what happened? So he explains what happened. We worked with TAC-DR. We came up with alternatives. We came up with something they should change the order to be and blah, 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 blah. And General Lowe says, hold on, don't do anything. I said, okay. So he does something. Don't know what it was. Don't want to know what it was. But the next thing we get back is General Lowe calls up Colonel Fain, says, all right, you're on the program. You got 1 week, go back down there and fix this. You got a second chance. He says, thank you, sir. So he looks at me and says, Abel, what the hell are we going to do? I said, I'll tell you what. Give me an idea here. So I said, what I'm going to do is going to take the airplane that meets all the ORD requirements that costs $11 trillion and weighs 17,000 tons. And I'm going to start a series of design changes to make you see what happens if you change certain critical parameters on the airplane. So can you do that? And I said, I can do that. No, it ain't going to be pretty, but it'll be doable. So for the next week, I took my guys, and because the Northrop airplane was a little more stable, I used that as a baseline. And I made 4 basic decision trees. A, weapons carriage. They wanted 8 plus 4. Which one going to happen?
Whoa.
Well, that's what they wanted.
Yeah, I want it too. Jeez.
Well, sure you do.
Yeah.
Why not?
I'm in.
When you go down and buy your new car, you want all that stuff.
Yeah.
Did you pay for it? Oh, wait a minute. No, you're going to pay for it? So I said, okay, weapons. Now we got range. And that's gas. And that's volume. And that's structure. And that's weight. And that's money. Then we got avionics. We got these side-looking radars. We got these forward-looking radars. We got these back-looking radars. We got like radars look up your butt. We got radars all over this airplane. I'm going to start getting rid of stuff of this avionics stuff in this tree. And then over here, we got signature. And we can make it more visible. So I had these 4, if I remember, I had 4 separate trees where I start taking things out of the airplane. And down at the bottom of each one of these trees was a 50,000 pound, $35 million airplane. And each step, you come down in range, or you come down in payload, or you come down in maneuverability, or you come down in the avionics suites. And anywhere along the line, you could stop for a certain price and a certain weight. And I said, boss, you can let me brief these, or you can brief them. And the way I brief them, if I was you, is just say, like it's a Chinese menu, General. I mean, here's the different options you can have to meet your end objective of 35 and 50. And he said, I'll take it. I said, I would expect that. Who in the hell wants to see a civilian up there? So I understand that. It's no problem to me. So I make up these charts, and they had these 4 trees. And I said, and we all roared down back to TAC to Bob Russ. He says, all right, what you got now? So I said, okay. General Fain, and then Colonel Fain at the time, gets up there and he starts, sir, we understand what you're looking for. Here is a way to look at the options you have. And he starts going down the tree with this one, and down the tree with that, and this one and that one. He goes through all the briefing. He says, here's how we can fix this, and blah, blah, blah. And Russ says, I like it. All right. As of right now, you can take the thrust reverser and throw that off the airplane. I ain't going to use that. Too much weight, complexity. It doesn't buy me a whole hell of a lot. If I can't get the prime beef guys to fix the runway in time, what the heck? And you can get rid of those side-looking radars. I mean, if you're invisible, you can see far enough in front. You got first look, first shot, first kill. That's good enough. Get rid of those things. You pick a couple other ones and says, all right, when you're done, come back down here every year with what you know, and we'll do some more of this. So everybody looks at each other and goes, Sierra Hotel. And we roar back up to back up to Wright Pitiful and start working it that way. And what had happened in my interpretation, it's just my personal interpretation, is that the TAC DR guys weren't communicating sufficiently with the commander about the decisions they were making in terms of what to trade versus what to keep. And he felt that he wasn't getting enough insight as to what the devil was going on with his new airplane. And as soon as we understood that, and the DR community understood that, it went a lot smoother. So every year we would go along and said, here's what we found out about XYZ. We still think this is viable. We should do that. And this other stuff is starting to be a little longer range. Perhaps we should drop that. And we traded the whole thing back and forth through the whole series of programs to finally come up with a final answer of what we were going to ask for in full-scale development. In the meantime, the prototypes are coming along, and we didn't want anything to do with those things in terms of taking those as Air Force property. That has a lot of problems. We let the contractors keep them. And what we did is says, you go get an N number for those airplanes from the FAA.
Really? Experimental aircraft? Like,
Absolutely.
wow.
If you will look closely at pictures of the YF-22 and YF-23, you will see on their tails, it's N22 YF and N22
No kidding.
FY.
Yeah.
No, same thing for Northrop. And what we did is we cleared a designated engineering representative from the FAA to go out and do an inspection of these 4 airplanes and issue them an airworthiness certificate, just like you would do if you built your airplane in your basement.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, we did our own safety reviews and other things like that, but they were not an Air Force asset. They were a contractor asset they were using to develop their program. But you go out, you take a look sometime.
Yeah. No, I got to look now.
N number on the back of the airplane.
Holy crap. Is that the first time? I had previous, like the F-16?
I don't know. I just thought it was a hell of a good idea. No, the F-16s and 17s were Air Force airplanes.
Oh, okay.
We took title to them.
Yeah.
We did not take title to them. The way it typically works, you take title to them, then bail them back to the contractor for their use.
Gotcha.
So came time for the flying, and Northrop always felt they had lost the YF-17, YF-16 program because they were second, and they were going to be first. And that's why they took the Pratt engine, because they thought it was further along. And they did fly first. Well, about 2 years before the first flight of these airplanes, I said, all right. I called up both chief engineers. I said, I want you to send me something. I want you to send me what I call a sealed envelope. And the sealed envelope will have what you predict your airplane will do when it is in flight test. I know what your flight test plan is. I already got that. And that's fine. You can do that. But I want you to tell me in this envelope, 2 years before you fly it, what the sustain G is going to be, what the accel rate's going to be, what the turn rate's going to be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And give me a list of about 10 things you will demonstrate in that flight test program. So I will have confidence that when you promise me something in the full scale development program, that you're pretty certain you're going to do that.
Yeah.
But it's not a requirement. I don't care if your sustain G is 1.1. Doesn't matter to me. If that's what you want to demonstrate, that's fine with me. If you want to demonstrate 9 Gs, that's okay with me. But you write it down on a piece of paper, and you will be evaluated on how close you came to what you said.
Wow.
Now, again, this is simple. This is a competition. You think somebody's going to say, yeah, I'm going to sustain 1.1 Gs.
No.
That's my airplane. You think that's going to happen? Ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
So it was pretty simple to me to figure this stuff out. But, you know, the system just didn't understand this kind of stuff. They said, you got to have requirements. How can we hold our feet to the fire? I said, we gave them the money. I mean, what the hell you want? So they sent me the sealed envelope, and I kept it. And when they took their first flight, I had a little ceremony in the program house, opened it up, said, here's what these guys are going to do. And believe it or not, they both did pretty much what they said they were going to do. I said, okay. So came time for the big showdown. Now, there was never any, to my recollection, any duplicate points between the two companies. So you couldn't say at 30,000 feet, 9/10 Mach number, the YF-23 did this, and at 30,000 feet, 9/10 Mach number, the YF-22 did that. You couldn't really say that because there was no requirement. There was no fixed point that says 9/10, 30,000 feet, 9G sustained. Didn't say that.
Mm-hmm.
So I did it that way. So it came time for the proposal for the full-scale development program. And I said to the company, I said, I don't want a technical volume. Now, the way typical proposal is they send you a contract, says we're going to do all this stuff here. They send you a specification that says the airplane will do that. And they send you a estimate of cost and says it's going to cost this and the schedule is going to take that. Then they send you a truckload of books saying why you should believe all that. Now, none of that stuff goes on contract. It's just the spec, the schedule, the cost, the performance. But all that other stuff is to make you feel good that they know what they're doing. So I called up the contractors and I said, you guys always whine that you spend millions and millions of dollars building all these books to convince the government that you know what you're doing. Now, I've been living with you guys for 4 years, and I can't tell you that I'm going to be the technical evaluator, but you might think I might be the technical evaluator, and I know what you can do. So I don't need all that stuff. And I can save you tens of millions of dollars. And they say, no, you have to have it. Oh, okay. So you want to spend the tens of millions of dollars? Oh, absolutely. So all that whining about how much it costs to do a proposal is so much horse hockey. No, you need it. Okay, fine.
We need it,
I
thank
said
you.
300 pages. He said, no, I can't do it in that. It's got to be 500 pages. I said 200 pages. He said, wait a minute. You're going the wrong way. So we finally negotiated 300 pages of technical, this is why we can do this. Trust me. So you give them, I don't know, 3 months, 4 months, something like that. They hire all the outside guys, spend millions of dollars writing these books and blah, 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 blah. And they sent it into the program office and it became paperweights. Didn't read it. Why should I read it? I'm not going to put it on contract. You tell me you're going to do this, this, and this. I said, show me where that's in the contract. It isn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, well, what good is this? Does it make you feel good? So I said, okay. I never read the damn thing. So we go through the evaluation and basically said, both airplanes meet the requirement. We think that they will achieve what they said in the specification. We believe the schedule is realistic. We believe the costs are a little understated, but that's typical. And the schedule looks reasonable. And so pick them. Up to you. And this was a fruition of what I had told Fane when he first met me. He had the idea that we had to make sure we had the best airplane. And I told him, let me give you a little story. You remember the controversial TFX I started this lecture with on this channel? Well, what actually had happened is there were two competitors, Boeing and General Dynamics. The Air Force felt the Boeing solution was the absolute best airplane. However, the system didn't think so. And they said, you aren't listening, Air Force. General Dynamics has the best airplane. And the Air Force went back and said, no. We went to Boeing airplane. Said, read my lips. The General Dynamics airplane is the best airplane. Roger that. and they got the General Dynamics airplane. So I told Fan, I said, now look, if we don't make sure that both of these airplanes are going to meet the requirement, we could get stuck with something that happened the last time I got involved in this stupid idea. And he said, never thought of that. I said, well, that's what I suggest you do and manage this program. And he said, okay. And that's what happened in the source selection. We went up there and said, technically, Lockheed will do it. Northrop will do it. There's some strengths with Northrop. There's some weaknesses in Northrop. There's some strengths in Lockheed. There's some weaknesses in Lockheed. Nothing we can't overcome. So you pick them. Cost or didn't want to worry about it. Not my job. Okay. But both of them were reasonably cost. So we briefed the guys that make the decision. It goes up to the Pentagon. Things happen. I have zero idea how or why or what happened to pick Lockheed over Northrop. But as I told a guy from the Los Angeles Times once when he kept bugging me in an interview, don't you think Northrop had the better airplane? I said, listen to me. Both airplanes and systems met the requirement. I don't care if they played horseshoes on the White House lawn to pick the winner. The Air Force would have got what it asked for. And he quoted me in the Los Angeles Times. and I believe that to this day. And why they picked Northrop or why they picked Lockheed, I didn't care.
Yeah.
Because the fighter pilots and the maintainers were going to get an airplane that was going to do what they needed it to do. And that's all I cared about. Because I make killer machines. And they were both damn fine killer machines. And if they picked Northrop, I'm happy. They picked Lockheed, I'm happy. They picked Lockheed and off we went.
Wow.
Picked Pratt & Whitney and off we went. That's the way it came out.
Holy crap.
Well,
Wow.
you know, people think that the best airplane is always going to win. Well, I got news for you. It doesn't. I give you the controversial TFX, where I started my life.